The Hot Box is our nightly chat with newsmakers and opinion shapers. Tonight, our final interview with the three candidates for Oregon's U.S. Senate seat. We've talked to Gordon Smith and Dave Brownlow. Now, the Speaker of the Oregon House, Jeff Merkley, is with us. Thanks for being with us.
Oh, it's tremendous to be with you, Tracy.
Boy,
Thank you very much.
We're down to the last few days.
Yes, isn't that great?
Yeah.
Only 6 more days.
That's right. The polls show it close. Some have you ahead. How are you feeling about all of that?
Well, I feel a tremendous sense of momentum. I just completed my 100-town tour down in Talent, Oregon, down in southern Oregon. Had a huge turnout. It was standing room only, and people standing in the hallway, people standing outside. And I'll tell you, the amount of energy there is about putting our nation back on track and realizing that this Senate race is really a big part of that.
Yes, it certainly is. It's gotten a lot of national attention. There are those, some even in your own party, if you can believe that, who say that any Democrat could win in this climate. Do you think you would be where you are today if it wasn't for the enormous popularity of Barack Obama in Oregon?
You know, here's what I think. People want a problem solver that has stepped in and said you can end paralysis, you can have a problem-solving orientation, a bipartisan orientation, and get things done. That's exactly the kind of leadership I showed in the Oregon House. We had 16 years of paralysis, and as the Oregonian said, had the most productive session in a generation, investing in health care and education, kicking out payday lenders, putting Oregon on the forefront of the green energy and green jobs, bringing those jobs to here.
But Barack Obama hasn't hurt.
Oh, no, not at all. But the point is that this is a moment when we see a parallel between the Oregon legislature was paralyzed and we ended it. We need that same effort to end that paralysis in the U.S. Senate, because that gridlock and paralysis, no matter who we elect as president, will not take us forward if you can't get bills voted on in the Senate. So that's why this campaign is so important.
Barack Obama endorsed you. Have you ever met him?
I have indeed.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I had a wonderful experience with him. My daughter had talked to me about that. She was backing Barack Obama, and so Mary and I asked her why that was, and she said, well, you know, Barack Obama has a daughter my age, and Hillary Clinton doesn't, and I hope that, Daddy, after you get elected and Barack Obama gets elected, I'll be able to invite the president's daughter over for a sleepover.
There you go, sleepovers. So, that's how old's your daughter?
Oh, well, she was then 9, now she's 10 now.
Yeah, see, perfect sleepover time. That's right. Let's talk about some of those ads and the amount of money spent on this race. Already estimated over $27 million, could reach $40 million spent on this one Senate seat. It would be a record in Oregon. I know the bulk of that money does come from outside of the state, but in these economic times, you know, I read those numbers, and something just doesn't seem right about it, does it?
No, it sure doesn't. And at risk of offending you as my host, I think people should turn off those televisions, at least zip fast through the ads, because that's why I carried a campaign to every corner of the state on the 100-town tour for change, and it's why I challenged Gordon Smith to 8 debates in every corner of the state. You know, he turned me down on that, and of course you hosted one of the 2 debates we did have, but I wanted to see a real substantive conversation about the big challenges we face. This $10 trillion debt, this meltdown on Wall Street, the predatory mortgage practices that began the problem, the 70,000 living wage jobs that have been shipped out of Oregon, the enormous dysfunction in Washington, D.C. These things merited a full, thorough examination. And so that's, since I couldn't do it through the debates, since Gordon didn't accept, I proceeded to travel the state, inviting people to come to forums and really having a personal discussion about how we put this nation back on track.
Well, I think because of a lot of those negative ads, it has been difficult for, you know, citizens to focus on some of the issues. So I want to run down a couple of things with you. This is going to be really hard for you because they're yes or no answers. You guys have trouble with that. Would you have voted for the $700 billion bailout?
Absolutely not. And
If
do I get to explain?
No, we're going to go through
Terrible
it first.
bill.
We can come back to
okay.
it. If both you and Barack Obama are elected, would you support Obama's tax plan?
Yes, I would.
Would you support a deadline for pulling out of Iraq?
Not quite a deadline, but a very firm schedule for withdrawal.
Okay. Would you support universal health care?
Yes, indeed.
All right. I think we've covered more issues there than we did the whole way. Can you think of an issue, though, where you might say, you know, buck the trend with the Democratic leadership? Is there something that you would go against your party on?
Absolutely. There's so many issues that I've been out of sync with my party. One is my opposition to the war in Iraq. I believe that this was absolutely a manufactured crisis by the Bush administration. I wrote an article about it 2 months before we went to war in Iraq, saying we should send in diplomats, not be dropping bombs. I disagreed with my party over the Patriot Act and retroactive immunity. I felt absolutely that Americans deserve to know who's been wiretapping whom, and that those folks should be held accountable, that's very important for the future. And I certainly disagreed with my party over the $700 billion blank check that did nothing to address the fundamental causes, did not restore accountability on Wall Street. Wall Street's still parting away now with our taxpayer-funded research or funded bailout. It's outrageous. We need to have somebody who believes in accountability, who believes in ending predatory practices, who will go in and say, no, we're not going to deregulate everything and let people do whatever they want. Fair rules the road, and then certainly let the economy thrive within those rules.
As you've mentioned, there is a whopping deficit. It's going to be hard to get anything done, really, when you're back there with owing that much money. Is there a federal program that you'd say, okay, I'm going to cut that one?
Oh, you bet. These special interest giveaways, most powerful corporations, most powerful international corporations. In fact, one of the programs I've cut is Gordon Smith's bragged that his giveaway of $265 billion of our taxpayer dollars to powerful international corporations was the biggest thing ever accomplished. You know, even the president of the Council of Economic Advisors for Bush said you would create more jobs dropping money out of an airplane. And I think we should have invested that $250 billion in our families. And that's the big difference between where Smith comes from and where I come from. He wants to give away all of our funds to the few and the powerful, and I want to invest in our families. And I want to invest in health care. I want to create living wage jobs as the foundations for our families. I certainly want to put us back on the forefront of being a society that understands that we don't send our jobs overseas. We create living wage jobs here in America.
Gordon Smith said while he was here, I thought this was so interesting, that he's being followed around by what I guess are called trackers, people with video cameras following them. Does that happen with you, hoping that you'll make a mistake?
You know, actually, Smith had a tracker on me from the very day I declared, and you remember that notorious hot bag ad?
And he had one on him, too, right?
Well, I don't think he's done hardly any public forums. In fact, to our knowledge, not once in the entire campaign has Smith invited the public to come to a forum. I went all over the state, held conversation with Oregonians. They disagreed with me or agreed with me. I wanted to hear about it. I wanted to hear their ideas. You know, not once as an ordinary citizen have you been able to go and talk to Gordon Smith in this campaign.
Jeff Merkley, thank you so much for being in the Hot Box tonight.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.